Finally, I'm super excited to introduce Classic Explained Episode 1. Fight Club. I love this movie so much. It's probably a top 10 personal favorite for me. I love the slick and grimy look of it, the really badass musical score, the super dense characters, and the many philosophical ideas it explores. So I'm really glad it was the first one to be the most suggested. There is so much to talk about here with this movie, so to break it down, we're going to use 3 themes. 1, narrator versus Tyler, where we'll talk about the narrator's namelessness, consumerism and status, modern desensitization, Tyler's split personality, the intro music scene, the narrator's insomnia, the pornographic frames, and the quick flashes of Tyler at the start of the film. 2, freedom and fulfillment, where we'll discuss the term hitting bottom, Tyler's philosophy, the support groups, the character of Marla, Tyler's masculinity, and Project Mayhem. And 3, pain and sacrifice, where we'll discuss the meaning of the soap, the value of death, the purpose of the Fight Club, and the central message of the film, and much more. And if you like this video, please leave a thumbs up and a comment. It helps so much. And if you want to see more of these, please make sure to subscribe as well. Let's get started. Okay, theme number 1, narrator versus Tyler. At the start of the film, we get to know our main character, the narrator. And I call him the narrator because for the majority of the film, we never get his actual name. We see name tags with Cornelius and Rupert. We also hear Travis. The reason why the narrator doesn't get a name for the majority of the film and also takes on multiple names is because this character represents the everyman. The everyman is simply defined as the ordinary or typical human being. In storytelling, it's the generic stock character that every man, every person can identify with in a very regular and common way. For example, the narrator works a common office-style job and lives in a common apartment. He remembers all of the minor differences in his morning, like when his boss hasn't had the specific coffee he drinks, because our narrator's day is so repetitive. He's also very attached to the material things he's able to purchase. He even admits he's become a victim to consumerism, as he says, "I've become a slave to the IKEA nesting instinct, purchasing furniture with little details that make him feel sophisticated and distinguished, and glassware designed by indigenous groups that he completely forgets the name of." The biggest issue with the narrator's lifestyle, however, is that he's become very desensitized to the purest and most wholesome aspects of life. He's willing to spend less on food in order to afford more furniture and designer clothes. He examines car accidents for a living with a team that cracks jokes about the victims, and this is all to protect the financial impact that the accidents could have on the company he works for. The main point being made with the narrator in the beginning of this film is that he's so disconnected from life that he can't feel. And this idea perfectly represents many of us and the lives we've gotten used to. The narrator can't feel guilt, he's too distant. He can't feel fear, he's too secure. He can't feel enjoyment, he's too eager to have more. And he can't feel pain, he's too protected. And this is where Tyler comes in, who represents every single thing that our narrator secretly, deeply longs for. So let's just get the big twist out of the way because that will make everything in this movie a lot easier to explain. Edward Norton's character's real name is Tyler Durden. But in the movie, Brad Pitt's character is the one who is called Tyler Durden. Brad Pitt's character is simply a projection and second personality that Edward Norton's character creates for himself as he transitions from a mundane everyman to the unique individual he secretly and deeply wants to be. Brad Pitt's character is the one who gets the name because he's a unique individual with identity. Edward Norton's character is an everyman, so he's nameless. For the video's sake, to make things clear, throughout this video, we're going to call Brad Pitt's character Tyler, and we're going to call Edward Norton's character the narrator, just to keep things clear. Okay, Tyler represents everything the narrator wants to be. The narrator's conversations and activities with Tyler are presented in the film as the growth of a new friendship. But these interactions are actually moments of self-development that the narrator is having with himself. Everything that Tyler does is what the narrator is actually doing. Facilitating Fight Club, sex with Marla, leading Project Mayhem. It's all the narrator. He's just developed this split personality and third-person way of seeing himself in the most ideal form. Tyler is cool, he's handsome, he's strong, and he does all the things the narrator has always wanted to do. Conversations between the two are actually the narrator talking to himself, just like how he narrates this entire movie. The narrator's fights with Tyler are simply fights with himself. Proof of this is when he beats himself up to frame his boss. He says, "For some reason, I thought of my first fight with Tyler." Tyler. We also never see the narrator and Tyler acknowledged at the same time together. They're always addressed individually, even if they are both standing side by side. Most importantly, all interactions with Marla are either the narrator and Marla or Tyler and Marla. Marla is very important to the story, so I'll make sure to talk all about her later in this video. We also get this super cool intro scene where this calm vinyl orchestral music is really quickly interrupted by this super high tempo experimental hip hop electronic rock song. This abrupt musical switch occurs as we look at what goes on within the narrator's mind and body. To me, this scene symbolizes Tyler Durden's awakening and unapologetic interruption into the narrator's previously ordinary mind. Our narrator suffers badly from insomnia throughout this film. Tyler says to the narrator at the end of the film, "You have night jobs because you can't sleep," which confirms that the narrator was taking on these evening and late night jobs that we see Tyler doing throughout the film. These jobs are the narrator's early desperate attempts at rebellion and chaos. He urinates in soup and slips pornographic frames into family films. It's these little acts of rebellion that would eventually lead Tyler Durden, aka our narrator, into creating such a movement like Project Mayhem. Project Mayhem is the endgame of our narrator's evolution from everyman to individual, where he can feel pain, approach death, suffer from tragedy, and destroy social order. The pornographic frame flashes in Tyler's movies connect nicely with the quick frame flashes of Tyler throughout the beginning of the film, before his introduction. We also hear the narrator say, "If you wake up at a different time, in a different place, could you wake up as a different person?" While Tyler casually passes by our narrator for the very first time. This all symbolizes the birth of the narrator's alter ego and his longing for rebellion, freedom, pain, and identity. Theme number 2, freedom and fulfillment. In Tyler's opinion, losing all hope was freedom. It's only after we've lost everything that we're free to do anything. He also often describes this idea with the term hitting bottom. Hitting rock bottom to regular people is the worst thing, but to Tyler, hitting bottom is the best thing. Tyler has completely detached himself from the common human habits of consumerism, dishonesty, valuing social status, and achieving financial wellness. None of this is important to Tyler. He's actually disgusted by it. You're not your job. You're not how much money you have in the bank. You're not the car you drive. Tyler lives by the motto of liberties, not luxuries. So while he may not have the nicest house or the shiniest car, he does whatever he wants at any point in his day. He has no obligations. This is the opposite from the life of our narrator at the beginning of the film. And the more time our narrator spends with Tyler, the more accustomed the narrator becomes to living without luxury and material comfortability. Tyler also puts a lot of importance on freeing himself from the rules of religion. You have to consider the possibility that God is not like you. He never wanted you. In all probability, he hates you. Tragedy and hopelessness allows us to feel something, which is true. Without the bad, we wouldn't have the good, which is the reason why our narrator goes to all these support groups at the beginning of the film. When people are dying, they really listen to you, instead of waiting for their turn to speak. Spending time with these people is a complete departure from a life of materialism and corporate success, which at the end of the day truly means nothing. And these people who are suffering reveal that. The only problem, and the really big problem at these support groups, is the presence of Marla. Marla reminds the narrator of his dishonesty. She reminds him that he hasn't completely let go of his disingenuous and dishonest lifestyle that he so desperately wants to escape. And this is why he hates her so much at first. Both characters are pretending and lying to the other group members, and they're both actually searching for the same type of freedom. Tyler confirms it when he says, "One thing I know is, she wants to hit bottom." This is the reason why the narrator ends up developing such strong feelings of love and compassion for Marla. He identifies perfectly with her struggle. They both have hopes of death and suffering as Marla purposely walks in front of traffic, and the narrator hopes his plane crashes. Tyler represents the hedonistic side of the narrator, inviting Marla over only to have sex with her. While the narrator feels compassion, attachment, and love for Marla, Tyler never shows any of those feelings. And this reveals Tyler's biggest flaw. Tyler represents the most primitive form of masculinity that the narrator feels he doesn't have and wishes he had. He indulges in really rough sex with women he doesn't care about, has really brutal fights with his bare hands and feet, and destroys any form of social order that he can. In psychology terms, they call this the id, defined as the part of the mind in which innate instinctive impulses and primary processes are manifest. I like to call this the caveman that lives deep down in every man, no matter what era we live in. And when that id comes out a little too much, you get a Tyler Durden level of toxic masculinity. He even suggests that him and the narrator don't need a woman. We're a generation raised by women. I'm wondering if another woman is really the answer we need. This is why Project Mayhem and the Fight Club have no women in it. Project Mayhem represents the chaos that results from Tyler's primitive, caveman-like form of masculinity. The end goal of Project Mayhem is to return to this tribal hunting and gathering way of life. Ironically, Tyler says to the narrator, "I say, let's evolve." And later in the film, he says, "You'll wear leather clothes that will last you the rest of your life. You'll climb the rich, thick kudzu vines that wrap the Sears Tower. And when you look down, you'll see tiny figures pounding corn, laying stripes of venison in the empty carpool lane of some abandoned superhighway." Here, he's describing a natural world taking over an orderly corporate one. This idea of freedom is even symbolized nicely by the haiku poem that the narrator sends to his coworkers. Worker bees can leave, even drones can fly away. The queen is their slave, which represents rebellion and taking back control from the billionaire corporate owners who only seem to be in power over the rest of society. Theme number 3, pain and sacrifice. Right after Tyler and the narrator steal fat from the waste bin, the two of them begin to make soap. Tyler tells the narrator an interesting story about the origin of soap. The ancient peoples found out that their clothes got cleaner when they washed them at a certain point in the river. When the narrator asks why, Tyler says, "Because human sacrifices were once made on the hills above this river. Bodies burned, water seeped through the wood and ashes to create lye. Once it mixed with the melted fat of the bodies, a thick white soapy discharge crept into the river." This story illustrates the importance of sacrifice for the greater good and proposes the idea that our own individual lives are not as important as we like to think they are. For example, when Bob is killed by a policeman while trying to execute a task for Project Mayhem, Tyler sees Bob as a required sacrifice for the greater purpose of Project Mayhem. The narrator, on the other hand, is devastated by Bob's death and can't help but feel the pain of losing a friend. Tyler selling soap represents the success of sacrifice. It's also a mockery of corporate values and societal beauty standards, since he uses the fat from liposuction waste and sells the soap to health and beauty retail stores for a very high price. In the film, we also get the important line, "Without pain, without sacrifice, we would have nothing." This quote describes part of Tyler's philosophy that claims the closer we get to death, the more alive we will feel, which is why he holds the innocent young man Raymond, terrified for his life, at gunpoint. But after Tyler lets him go, he says, "Tomorrow will be the most beautiful day of Raymond K. Hessel's life." Another example is when Tyler crashes the car and crawls out celebrating, saying, "We just had a near-life experience." So what's the point of the actual Fight Club? The Fight Club for these men is an escape. It's an escape from the nonsensical glorification of materialism, image, and social status that we all have somehow agreed to. It's a cathartic exercise to let loose, recapture their purest freedom, and let their raging inner id and primitive form of masculinity finally come out entirely. Who you are in Fight Club is not who you are in the rest of the world. It wasn't about winning or losing. Nothing was solved. Nothing mattered. We were all saved. The major message in this film, however, is that it's important for men to strike a balance between the way of the narrator and the way of Tyler. Like Tyler, we should take risks, be bold, have confidence with women, forget about what everyone thinks, refrain from materialistic, corporate, and social pressure, and recognize a purpose that you could serve that is greater than your life. But also, like the narrator, we need to have respect for others, build genuine relationships, value the lives of others, and be comfortable with expressing our feelings for a woman that we deeply care for. And I believe in this final shot, the two Tylers have become one. The real Tyler Durden's integrity, confidence, and gratitude for an honest, emotional relationship is all he is left with, and all that he needs. Alright, that's my analysis. Mother is coming up next. Thank you so much for voting. And please suggest in the comments another movie you want to see explained and analyzed so I can create a new poll. And surely let me know your thoughts on Fight Club because that movie is insane. I hope you subscribe so I can see you again. And thank you so much for watching. See you later.